So when I first decided to do The Chosen and this show about Jesus, it was always under the idea that this was going to be different. From the beginning, was going to have a hard time imagining doing this show without Dan Haseltine.
It was a very slow dance to get into, like, so I'm doing this show, and it's about Jesus, but it's not just Jesus. It's actually a very human story about the people around Jesus and the way that he affected them and the way that they affected him and the way their stories intersected and wove together. And at that point, I felt like, all right, this is worth entertaining, and I've always trusted Dallas.
And I got a text message from Dan, and it said, "Hey, what are you doing the next couple months? I might have a TV scoring kind of opportunity for us." And I thought, this is literally nothing more perfect could happen to me right now, timing-wise, and doing this kind of work. Writing music to picture is something that has been on my bucket list.
Most stories about Jesus are these, they have these incredibly dramatic, sentimental, orchestral scores to them. There isn't an emotional moment that is left untouched by the music. Everything is sort of handed to the audience on a platter. And I think when Dallas and I were talking, we really wanted to create something that gave the audience a little more credit, that they would find some of those emotional spaces, and that our musical palette could be really different.
He's usually trying to push the envelope artistically, and I was like, that's exactly what I want, and I want you to have complete freedom. There's no rules on this.
And we felt like, what if we could take what we knew of Middle Eastern music and what other tones would connect with that? And we thought, well, there's something about blues music and the way that you can add certain elements of blues music into Middle Eastern music, that it all kind of works together. And then let's just add in what is kind of maybe our most contemporary version of music that has come out of oppression. Spirituals and things that had been written and sung during the height of slavery in America. And we thought, well, what an interesting way if we could combine those three textures as the core of what we made for music. I feel like we can create a very human sounding musical bed for this show.
This show is going to be about kind of that mix of pain and hope. And that's one of the things that came from slave spirituals, was this immense suffering, but this also dignified beauty that came from the hope and this belief that God was actually present and that there was going to be rescue. That's something that I think was also taking place 2,000 years ago, was this immense oppression and enslavement and pain and suffering, but there was also this beauty and hope that was emerging from it. And so I wanted us to capture that in some way.
And what we landed on was this, just this great combination of noises.
Whatever instrument it was that was sampled, it's got some drift, and music lovers out there watching the show will probably notice this is not really perfectly in tune. I don't know if they're using a sample of something or if this is a live player, but it's not perfectly in tune, which is part of the reason we were so drawn to it. And then we've got a drone texture that we brought in, which is which comes from India. And it's a drone sound, and it's essentially just one note that keeps going and droning under everything else. That drone, I think for us, is a bit of a spiritual metaphor for God. And that there's this sound that no matter what's going on in the scene, that sort of undergirds everything. And we've got some various plucked stringed instruments. There's some guitar, and there's an octave mandolin. And then we've got various other bits and bobs of percussion things that we use to keep the textures interesting. This is an opportunity to go to those places that are the bumpiest places, where things are a little bit out of tune, where things are not perfectly in time, where the sounds are a little bit raw and vulnerable and exposed. I think it brings out those elements in the presentation of the story.
This is what sets the tone for the show. Because we were trying to do something that wasn't just the typical Jesus show, we had to create a theme song that was a bit more startling.
Right off the bat, we wanted the audience to go, this isn't my grandfather's Jesus show. This is actually something that, even though it's timeless and even though it's set 2,000 years ago, but it still feels current. It still feels fresh.
We wanted to use a lot of the elements that we were going to use in the rest of the show, and use them a little bit differently. And so we knew we were going to make something that had a bit of this kind of stompy, clap sort of element to it. It would have some of that gritty blues guitar in it as well. But we weren't really sure what it would end up sounding like in the end, but we just knew we wanted something that was going to carry all those elements. What I love is that the song is an invitation. In a time when we're very divisive or people are building up walls, that at the core of Christianity, the lyric, ain't no trouble with the mess you've been, jump in the water, like all of these, the whole point was to just basically say, like, you are fully embraced. And to be able to kick off the show with that sentiment every time, in a way, to me, it felt like, this is going to root the show and this idea. Not all trouble with the mess you've been. It's been great to see how that song, however startling and disjointed it may seem starting out the show, is so connected and woven into every one of the episodes.
So at the end of episode 4, it's the climax of all 4 episodes. It's the moment of release. It's the moment of joy. And so I assumed, because it was so triumphant, that the music was going to end up being full and big and important.
For some reason, in my mind, I kept coming back to this idea of rhythm and just wanting it to feel like it's a party. I wanted it to have a little bit of chaos in it. I wanted it to just feel like it was driving, and it was sort of like the announcement, like, okay, this guy, Jesus, is like, he's pretty legit. He's just doing some things that nobody else is doing.
Dan said, I got an idea for the sequence. It's going to be in this, almost in this Irish jig sort of rhythm, and we're going to go in this dancier direction with it that's more playful and fun.
And I would sort of like move my elbows and stuff while I'm trying to describe it to him, and dun 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 dun.
And I thought, all right, let's chase it.
When it was sent to me, the first draft of the music, I was watching on my laptop. At first it started, and I thought, what is this? What? No. This isn't what I was envisioning. And then within like 5 seconds, I was like, oh, wait a second. And I started moving. And I'm like, I found myself actually like cheering, and my fists were pumping, and I was like, yes, oh my goodness. Before it was even done, I paused it and started texting Dan and Matt, and I was saying, I don't know what this is, but it's awesome. I'm cheering and laughing. I actually was laughing too. I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be so great. And so that's one of those moments where the audience really gets a chance to celebrate. And that when people say to me, in this scene, I felt so much joy, I couldn't even explain it. And I think that's the feeling that music provides, is it's this unexplainable, supernatural thing that happens. What Dan and Matt have done with the music in the show is bring you to that place that's not just an emotional place, but it's also a spiritual place. I am so proud of this show because it's so much better than I am. And what Matt and Dan have done with the score is taking the show to a level way beyond that I envisioned. And that's a really cool place to be when you're seeing something that's even better than you thought it could be. And it actually makes you feel really safe. And I feel really safe because I know that I'm in the hands of people that are way smarter than I am.
Trouble.